It's Final Friday.
Dave Pell, I asked you to tell me about someone who inspires you, and you said José Andrés, who is on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Chef José Andrés, and Andrés is spelled Andres. I've read plenty about him over the past couple years, but for people who might not know, who is he and what makes him inspiring?
In a lot of ways, I feel like he represents so many people who have done really good things that are related to these horrible news stories we've experienced over the last year or two. Between COVID and the economic divide and natural disasters, it all seems so overwhelming sometimes. And then we're further overwhelmed by the fact that it seems like most people who are getting media time are just saying things that are either hateful, ridiculous, or just piss us off instead of make us feel inspired. And I felt, especially during 2020, there was this moment when COVID first hit that we were so ripe as a culture to be led and to be brought together. You know, when I was a kid, I grew up in the Bay Area and we had a few droughts, nothing like what we have now. But when we'd have a drought, like the mayor and the principals would all get together and we'd have all these rules about not using water and we'd like compete with each other. And it was like a thing that we would work together on. And I felt none of that during COVID, which was such a much bigger threat and a much bigger challenge. And if there ever was a moment when people to put politics aside, it's like human versus virus is that moment. And yet we were all pretty let down by the moment. So José Andrés sort of fulfills that for me. He goes to where the trouble is. If you want to follow the news, you can just follow José Andrés. The news industry tends to focus on one story at a time and whatever the most controversial. So as we're talking, the big story that's being covered is the pullout from Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. But if you follow José Andrés over the last week, he had a tweet recently that said, "Good night, everybody. I'm leaving Haiti for now to go meet the World Central Kitchen team in New Orleans."
Right.
So he shows that the news, really the biggest news affecting the most people was where he was needed the most, was the weather disasters and other natural disasters in Haiti and in Louisiana. So who he is, it's interesting that Haiti was the place that he was tweeting from because that's where he first started out. He was, as you mentioned, a celebrity chef, or is a celebrity chef. And during a disaster in Haiti in 2010, he started this thing called the World Central Kitchen, where he went there with a pretty small group of people and started feeding people who needed help. Now, a decade and a year later, he finds himself back there for another natural disaster. Poor Haiti has a lot of them. But wherever there's trouble, he goes. I mean, it's really inspiring to follow his Twitter because of that. And he has built this incredible team that does this around the world. And it's not just him. It's actually, like I said, he represents people doing good things, but even more specifically, he represents chefs and celebrity chefs that have some throw with the public, doing incredible things for people when they need it the most. So like a friend of mine, Tyler Florence, who's a big chef on the Food Network, like anytime there's a fire, if there's a puff of smoke in Napa or Sonoma or the Calder fires we're having now near Tahoe, you know, he is there and he takes his family and they're feeding people. And the energy these people have is just so inspiring. So if I'm going through 1,000 tweets and they're all just people yelling at each other and trying to score political points after a terrible news story, it's always just inspiring to see Jose like taking a selfie of himself leaving one earthquake scene to go to a flood scene and giving people the thing they need most. You know, it's like the very base of Maslow's hierarchy, right? You need some food. And yeah, I just find him endlessly inspiring.
Well, and we should say that the various places he's been over the past decade, it's not just him making meals. Like he's, leading this group World Central Kitchen, and I looked it up. When I first kind of became aware of him was when he went to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria hit in 2017. And I think, if I have the number right, he had 19,000 volunteers with him on that trip. So he's certainly the leader and the figurehead of this much larger relief effort that's going on. They made millions of meals for people. It really is one of the most inspiring things. I agree with you on this one for sure. When a natural disaster hits, it seems like his instinct is to just go and help however he can. which that's what makes him so admirable. But I'm wondering, as someone working in media, as someone with a big platform yourself, like, how do you think about your responsibility, or what your first step is when something happens that needs attention, that needs people to kind of focus on it? Like, what is your thought process there?
Yeah, I mean, historically, my first thought process really is to pull back and try to give people the most accurate information about that story. I see that as my key role, because I'm a couch hero. I'm not really out there doing it. And that's probably why I'm so impressed with people who are. But I think on a broader level, especially during the pandemic year, before the pandemic, I always had a sponsor in my newsletter and, made a pretty decent amount of money off of that. But during the pandemic, I decided I really wanted to use my newsletter to support either nonprofits or different efforts that were going on to help people, whether it was, in some cases, it actually was getting people to support causes related to World Central Kitchen. There were actually hundreds of these that emerged throughout the country. One sort of angle in particular I thought made a ton of sense was having the government or the state pay restaurants to prepare foods for frontline workers and first responders during the early part of the pandemic. The government, I really felt, should have done this. I emailed my governor several times, and some of his people he put me in touch with. I wrote about it. I talked to people about it, and a few people that I know actually started to do something like that. But unfortunately, it wasn't government funded. I really think it should have been. It was a big missed opportunity, I think. It made perfect sense. It's so rare that you have a win-win, and this was a win-win-win. The restaurants win, the people who work at the restaurants win, the frontline workers win, and we as consumers win because the restaurants that we needed to order out from or whatever would stay in business. So a lot of people set these programs up, and a couple of them were friends of mine. So I would try to promote those a lot in NextDraft, and we were able to raise quite a bit of money. Another friend of mine started a program, which was the Frontline Counseling Project here in San Francisco, where they got about 500 therapists to provide free services for frontline workers because they could see very early on that there were going to be a lot of trauma. I can't imagine how much worse it is now that we're like almost 2 years into this nightmare.
Right. But
this was early on, and so they treated thousands of hours worth. So that kind of stuff, when I either know the person or trust the source, and I can put the NextDraft readership behind supporting that, I think is really valuable, because everybody, when they see a hurricane hit Louisiana, or they hit a disaster hit Haiti, or they see this incredibly sad and horrifying scene play out in Afghanistan, wants to think, what do I do? But you go on the web and there's like 1,000 people asking for your money, 1,000 politicians emailing you for $5. And it's like, well, I don't know which to give to. I don't know what to trust. Every day there's a story about some fake organization. So I think that's one thing that as a newsletter writer, and you as a podcaster, as we develop sort of a trusted relationship with our audiences, that if we can vet those things and give people an outlet for that sort of behavior that makes them feel good and supports a cause, it's pretty valuable. So I'm no José Andrés, but hopefully I've given him a few bucks through NextDraft over the years. Every little bit counts, yeah. And so, yeah, so if folks listening to this, if you want to donate to World Central Kitchen, it's wck.org. That was José Andrés, who's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Chef José Andrés.